Tehran is celebrating, but Israel isn't sitting idly by. While Iranians celebrate their victory under a sky of fireworks, Netanyahu is warning the world that the war is still raging. However, the biggest surprise actually came from the United States. The White House's focus has been disrupted after Donald Trump was hit by a wave of impeachment proceedings. In this video, we'll take an in-depth look. Why has Iran suddenly gained the upper hand? And can the United States remain Israel's shield amid its domestic crisis? Stay tuned. Here's facts on the mutual attacks, Part 14. Escalation ahead of the ceasefire. This major escalation reached its most tense point just a few days before the ceasefire was announced. Since late March 2026, Donald Trump had been issuing one ultimatum after another to Iran, with the primary threat being to destroy power plants and cripple the country if the Strait of Hormuz was not immediately opened. The initial 48-hour deadline turned into a series of extensions 5 days, 10 days until it finally entered a 6th extension marked by confusion. Rather than demonstrating resolve, this pattern actually revealed immense behind-the-scenes pressure, as if Washington itself was not yet fully prepared for the consequences of its threats. As the final deadline announced for 8 p.m. Eastern Time approached, the situation on the ground actually worsened. Israel and the United States escalated their attacks, targeting not only military sites but also vital infrastructure. 8 bridge sections in various major Iranian cities were struck to cut off logistics routes. At nearly the same time, a power plant in Mashhad was reportedly hit by an airstrike. There were even controversial reports of an attack on a synagogue in Tehran, a narrative that sparked a strong backlash because it touched on a sensitive issue and had the potential to expand the conflict into the realm of identity. However, Iran's response exceeded many people's expectations. Less than 24 hours before Trump's final deadline, Iran launched an attack that was not only military in nature, but also economically strategic. The target was not a military base, but rather Saudi Arabia's largest petrochemical industrial zone, Jubail. The impact was immediately felt globally. Industrial supply chains were disrupted, global chemical production was threatened, and energy markets became volatile once again. This signaled that Iran is not only active on the battlefield, but also at the heart of the global economy. Amid the tensions, Trump's rhetoric has grown increasingly heated. His remarks about the potential collapse of a civilization have sparked a wave of condemnation, not only from abroad, but also from within the United States itself. Political figures across party lines have begun to speak out, deeming the threat dangerous and disproportionate. Calls to invoke the 25th Amendment have even begun to gain momentum, signaling serious concerns about the stability of leadership in the White House. Congress and the legislature have responded with increasingly intense political pressure. Dozens of lawmakers are urging that Trump be removed from office, either through impeachment or other constitutional mechanisms. This situation creates a paradox. While the United States is trying to pressure Iran from the outside, the greatest pressure is actually coming from within its own borders. Temporary ceasefire agreement. An agreement was finally reached just about an hour before Donald Trump's final ultimatum expired. The United States and Iran agreed to a 2-week temporary ceasefire with one key condition: Iran must reopen the Strait of Hormuz. This agreement did not come out of nowhere, but was the result of intense diplomatic efforts through Pakistan and subtle pressure from China. Iran also presented a 10-point plan as a basis for negotiations, including the lifting of sanctions and the withdrawal of U.S. military forces from the region. Although not yet fully approved, this proposal serves as an important starting point, signaling that the conflict, which was on the verge of erupting, has now shifted to the negotiating table. Escalation following the ceasefire. The recently announced ceasefire did not actually put an end to the conflict. Instead, just hours after the agreement took effect, a new round of escalation erupted at various strategic locations. The attack on an Iranian oil refinery on Lavon Island was the primary trigger. The vital energy facility was struck suddenly, and to complicate matters further, there were indications that United Arab Emirates Mirage fighter jets were involved in the operation. Iran even received signals that the attack was not directly linked to the United States or Israel. But on the ground, many observers saw a more complex coordination taking place behind the scenes. Iran's response was swift and forceful. Within a short time, they launched a wave of retaliatory strikes, dubbed the 100th wave of Operation True Promise. 4. The scale of these attacks was far greater than before. The targets were not only military facilities, but also the region's energy hubs. From oil facilities in Saudi Arabia and Qatar, to the energy networks in the United Arab Emirates, including the major oil depot in withdrawal, were targeted. These attacks demonstrate one crucial point. Iran aims to prove that it can reach and paralyze the vital infrastructure underpinning the global economy. Not only that, but the targets have expanded to include other strategic locations, such as technology hubs and infrastructure in Israel, as well as military bases in the region. Reports even indicate attacks on warships and aircraft carriers, forcing them to withdraw from the conflict zone. This marks a significant shift in the pattern of warfare, from mere tit-for-tat attacks to a systematic effort to comprehensively weaken the enemy's capabilities. Amid the increasingly chaotic situation, Israel launched a major operation known as Eternal Darkness. This operation is considered a clear violation of the spirit of the ceasefire, particularly since it was carried out while de-escalation efforts were underway. Massive attacks also occurred in Lebanon, with hundreds of targets struck in a short period, resulting in a large number of civilian casualties. This further complicated the situation and expanded the conflict to more areas. Iran has once again taken drastic measures. In response to these continued attacks, they have closed the Strait of Hormuz once more. This decision immediately sent shockwaves through global markets. The vital waterway, through which the majority of the world's oil supply flows, has come to a standstill once again, sparking fears of a larger energy crisis. The world now faces not only a military conflict, but also a serious threat to global economic stability. From the battlefield to a global political crisis. As it enters its latest phase, this conflict has not only shifted to the battlefield, but is also shaking the very foundations of global political power. In the United States, pressure on Donald Trump is reaching a fever pitch. Along with Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, he now faces a serious threat of impeachment. Nearly 100 members of Congress are pushing for the invocation of the 25th Amendment, arguing that Trump's decisions and rhetoric during the conflict have crossed the line. At the same time, the landscape of international support is beginning to shift. European nations, ranging from France and Germany to the United Kingdom, have openly begun aligning their positions with Iran's key demands, particularly regarding the inclusion of Lebanon in the ceasefire agreement. Even Australia has reinforced a similar stance, signaling that pressure on Israel and the US is now coming from their own allies. This marks a rare moment where Iran no longer stands alone at the diplomatic table. Strategically, Iran's position appears far more advantageous. It has successfully maintained its nuclear program, kept its proxy forces intact, and, most crucially, demonstrated that its missile and drone capabilities remain intact, despite immense pressure. Control over the Strait of Hormuz has now become a powerful bargaining chip, giving Iran direct leverage over the global economy. Amid all this, a strong message emerged from Mojtaba Khamenei, signaling a new direction for Iran's strategy. He described this conflict not as an end, but as the beginning of a new phase in which Iran and the Axis of Resistance network will act as a unified whole. He also emphasized that control over the Strait of Hormuz will be the primary tool to counter Western sanctions pressure. His message is clear. Iran is not merely surviving, but is building its position as a more dominant regional power. The hope for permanent peace remains open, but the specter of escalation has not entirely faded. With more than 50,000 US troops still deployed to the Middle East, the situation remains fragile. If diplomacy fails, the conflict could erupt again on a larger scale, dragging the region into a far broader and harder-to-control war.